Let's have a look at what we have so far with this series on this ing. We have estoy trabajando for I am working. So this is the present ing. Then we have estaba trabajando, I was working, for the past ing. And we have just trabajando, the independent ing, meaning working. What I'd like to introduce to you now is the dot ing. And that would be estuve trabajando. So instead of estaba, which is a line in estar, now we have estuve, which is a dot. So we can also combine that with this ando or yendo sound. Now it means a very specific thing in English. If we wanted to express, I spent 3 hours working last night, that would be anoche estuve trabajando por 3 horas. This estuve with ando or yendo means spent in English. So I spent 3 hours working last night. Anoche estuve trabajando por 3 horas. It's a little tricky to understand at first, because this in a way still means I was working. But because it's estuve and not estaba, you get this dot where I spent this amount of time doing something. So I'll say that again. If this was estaba, it would simply be last night I was working for 3 hours. Okay, so like this. Anoche estaba trabajando por 3 horas. So I was working for 3 hours last night, and then, you might say cuando something happened. So it's a line. But if this changes to estuvo or estuve, we'll say, for I. Now this is a dot, estuve trabajando, and in English that would translate as I spent. So you can see like a dot here as well. I spent 3 hours working last night. It's your dot. So this estuve with ando yendo always translates in English into this word spent, whatever angle it may be. He spent, she spent, we spent, they spent, and so forth. So it's very important that you remember how to conjugate the dot past of estar. And I wonder if you can just pause now and see if you can do that. Estuve, estuviste, estuvo, estuvimos, estuvieron. So again, how would you say you spent, changing the angle here, you spent 3 hours working last night? How would you say that? Anoche estuviste trabajando. Here is you spent. Estuviste trabajando por 3 horas. He spent working, or he spent 3 hours working yesterday. How would you say that? Ayer estuvo trabajando por 3 horas. So yesterday he spent 3 hours working. It's kind of difficult because the word order doesn't match what we would say in English. This is literally yesterday he spent working for 3 hours, something like that. What about this? We spent 3 hours working yesterday. Ayer estuvimos trabajando por 3 horas. Then the last angle, they spent 3 hours working yesterday. Ayer estuvieron trabajando por 3 horas. So yesterday, they spent 3 hours working. Let's try this concept now with the verb to wait, which is esperar. So how would you just say waiting? Esperando. Esperando. Now how would you say I spent 2 hours waiting? Estuve esperando por 2 horas. You spent 2 hours waiting yesterday. Ayer estuviste esperando por 2 horas. He spent 1 hour waiting. Estuvo esperando por 1 hora. If we wanted to add for me onto the end of it, so it would be like he spent 1 hour waiting. Let's add on the end here for me. Then what happens is you add it onto the end here. So it would be estuvo esperándome por 1 hora. These words just keep getting longer and longer, right? So he estuvo esperándome, waiting for me por 1 hora. How would you say we spent 1 hour waiting for you yesterday? Ayer estuvimos esperándote por 1 hora. This is getting into quite advanced territory now. So, just we spent is estuvimos esperando. Yesterday we spent 1 hour waiting. But for you, the te gets hooked on to the end of esperando. So we have ayer estuvimos esperándote. We spent 1 hour waiting for you. How would you say they spent 2 hours waiting for us last night? Anoche estuvieron esperándonos por 2 horas. So we have last night, anoche. Just they spent is estuvieron for they, and then esperando. So estuvieron esperando por 2 horas. They spent 2 hours waiting. For us, the nos gets hooked on to the end of esperando. Anoche estuvieron esperándonos por 2 horas. Let's do a quick summary of this now. We have esperando, which means waiting. So, waiting for me, we would tag on me, esperándome. Waiting for you, esperándote. Waiting for him, esperándolo. Waiting for her, esperándola. Waiting for us, esperándonos. And waiting for them, esperándolos if they were all males or a mixed group. And esperándolas if they were all females. So you can see there's quite a lot of little pronouns that you can tag on to the end. Me, te, and then lo or la for him or her, nos for us, and then we have the plurals, right? So you, go back here. Los for all males or a mixed group, and las for all females. Let's switch to the verb hablar now, which of course becomes hablando with the ing tense. And then for the .ing we would have estuve hablando. Now to this we're going to play around with more pronouns. So often when we use this verb we can say, well, I talked to him, or he talked to me, or we talked to them, and so forth. So we have these pronouns of me, te, le, nos, and les. This is to me, to you, to him or to her, to us, and to them. First of all, how would you say I spent 2 hours talking? Estuve hablando por 2 horas. Now try to make the leap to say, I spent 2 hours talking to you. Estuve hablándote por 2 horas. I spent 2 hours talking to her. Estuve hablándole por 2 horas. How would you say they spent 1 hour talking to me? Estuvieron hablándome por 1 hora. We spent 1 hour talking to them in the supermarket. Estuvimos hablándoles por 1 hora en el súper. A little summary for you now. I know that the material in this particular video was quite advanced, but I believe that honestly that's a good thing for you every once in a while to push your mind out of its comfort zone, because it makes all the other stuff instantly feel a lot easier in comparison. You know how it's all kind of relative. So for that reason alone, it's good, even if you found this video very challenging and difficult. I have kind of a final bit of good news for you, or a bit of good news after all of that trying and all of that challenge. This tense, the dot ing, where you have estuve hablando, I really consider it optional, because if you consider, is there any real difference in meaning between I was talking to you for 2 hours and I spent 2 hours talking to you? I mean, is there any real difference in the meaning between those? Probably not. So what that means is that you can be aware of this tense, the dot, up with ando or yendo, estuve hablando, but all it's doing is adding a little bit of polish to your Spanish, where you can say, I spent so much time doing this or doing that. Because you can equally just continue to use an example of this one, right? Estaba. You don't have to go into estuve, just because I spent 2 hours talking to you and I was talking to you for 2 hours. There's really no difference. So you can be aware of this dot ing, but you don't have to use it if you don't want to. You can continue just to use the past ing with estaba hablando if you wish.